I'm picking up my blaster, put it on my side. I'm jumping in my Falcon, Wookiee up my side. I'm Solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, Solo. I swear I'm not happy that exists. Yeah, that seems about right. I'll go surrender myself to the dark side now. What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, bringing you my review for Solo, a Star Wars story. Set prior to the events of A New Hope, the plot basically follows the early adventures of Han Solo, played by Alden Ehrenreich, and how he met his Wookiee companion Chewbacca, how they met a younger Lando Calrissian, played by Donald Glover, and they all get involved in a heist within the criminal underworld. Going into this movie, I had moderately low expectations, even for a Star Wars film. To give those of you that don't know some background about my history with this series, I would consider myself a casual fan of Star Wars. I'm not a diehard fan of this franchise. I don't have any nostalgic recollection of this series that would make me fall in love with it completely. But in terms of the recent slate of movies that we've gotten under Disney, I've enjoyed them all. Star Wars The Force Awakens I thought was a more than solid return to form for this franchise, live action wise. Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, the first Star Wars story film, I really enjoyed. We had a nice take of a war film in the Star Wars universe with this movie, and last year's the most divisive / polarizing / controversial film of the series, in my opinion, where those love it or hate it. I personally fall on the love side. This is probably one of my favorite entries in the saga overall for how bold and beautiful it is, and I felt that it could take the series in some new directions as Episode 9 does approach next year. And yeah, we've been getting Star Wars movies every year, one new movie every year for the past few years, and it seems like it's going to continue. And with Solo, A Star Wars Story, this is one of those entries that I was not as excited for, because I agree with many on this sentiment. Did we really ask for a Solo movie, a Solo Han Solo movie? One could even argue, too, that every Star Wars movie after the original trilogy is unnecessary as well. But hey, that's besides the point. We're getting more of these movies whether anyone likes it or not. It just seemed pointless to me to have an entire movie dedicated to the origins of Han Solo, one of the most iconic characters of this franchise, and I wasn't entirely sold on Alden Ehrenreich being cast as this character. He just didn't seem like he had the look or charm, and plus, there was some behind-the-scenes drama with this movie. Now, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were originally attached to direct this film. Outstanding directing duo, I would say, but they apparently got fired / quit over creative differences. I personally don't know the entire story. Bottom line, they exited the project, and director Ron Howard had to step in for directing duties. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller got executive producer credits. Setting all of my preconceived notions aside for this movie, I still had optimism that this could be a fun adventure with a cast of characters that I was personally excited to see play a huge part in this film. But before I get to those supporting players, let's start out with the title character himself, Han Solo, played by Alden Ehrenreich. Now, like I said before, I wasn't entirely sold on him playing this iconic character, and I had previously seen him in Blue Jasmine, the Woody Allen film starring Cate Blanchett, and he was only in about 3 scenes or so I couldn't entirely judge his acting ability from the screen time in that film. But in terms of his screen time and his overall performance as Han Solo, I thought he did a more than competent job. He was fine in the role, actually. Now, I was thankful that he didn't do an outright imitation of Harrison Ford's portrayal of the character, as he did start out very cocky, very gutsy. That's something Han Solo would carry in terms of character traits. As the movie progressed as well, I slowly warmed up to Alden Ehrenreich's version of the character in how he portrayed him as plucky and eventually did exude some character traits that Ford used when playing this character originally. In fact, Harrison Ford himself does approve of Ehrenreich portraying his iconic character, and for my take, I think Ehrenreich did an admirable job as well. Now we move on to the supporting players in this film, and overall, I feel that for the most part, they actually stole the show from our title character. We have Woody Harrelson as Tobias Beckett, a criminal and also Han's mentor of sorts. Now, he's Woody Harrelson. He is as likable as ever. He does have a bit of snark to him and a bit of seriousness to how he would play a character like this and eventually kind of pass on his traits to Han Solo in the later films that we do know and love. Emilia Clarke plays Kira, a former lover of Han, and I thought there was a substantial amount of intrigue to her character. She was very mysterious. I enjoyed the chemistry between her and Alden Ehrenreich. Donald Glover, of course, plays a younger Lando Calrissian, and oh my god, I felt he was pitch perfect casting as this character. Man, when he pops up on screen, he sounds like Billy D. Williams. He captures a lot of the swagger, suave mannerisms, and overall charm that Billy D. Williams had originally as this character. In fact, Glover did meet with Williams to talk about advice of this character, and wow, yeah, Glover definitely was one of the standouts of this movie. Thandie Newton plays Val Beckett, the wife to Woody Harrelson's character, and for the screen time she had, I felt she was badass in some nice moments. Phoebe Waller-Bridge plays L337, the droid who is also a companion to Lando Calrissian. She has kind of a mini subplot within her personality and how she's fighting for droids' rights. And as a droid herself, I enjoyed how she was very snarky too. And the actress who played her had part motion capture performance, part CGI, which added to the fluidity in how she moved. I did like that. Jonas Sautamo, I messed up that name so badly. I apologize. The actor who portrays Chewbacca, he also portrayed Chewbacca in the other recent Star Wars movies. I thought he did a nice job as well. I'm not sure if he provides the voice for the character as well, but his overall presence, I thought that him and the chemistry he had with Alden Ehrenreich definitely showed some sparks of why we love these two as a duo. Paul Bettany plays Dryden Voss. He's kind of like a crime lord who Han Solo and Beckett go to at one point in the movie. He's sort of a villainous type of character. He didn't have that much screen time, but I thought he had a sinister presence. There's also Jon Favreau as a smaller CGI character who's not in it that much either, but I recognize his voice, and I thought he provided some nice humor to the film as well. So all in all, with this cast of players, well, I felt that Ehrenreich did a valiant effort in portraying Han Solo. It is the supporting players here, notably Donald Glover, Emilia Clarke, and Woody Harrelson, that steal the show. The writing in this film, as I've mentioned earlier with the plot synopsis of this movie, definitely sets up how we get to see Han Solo become the Han Solo we know and love. As I've mentioned earlier too, I did not see much point in telling the origins of Han Solo if there was already so much mysterious nature to the character and also making him so likable. So seeing it be told from the beginning, or at least told from a specific point of his life and how he did end up with some of the supporting players in this movie, it was somewhat interesting from the beginning. In the first few segments of the film, there's a lot of energy presented to us. This is a movie that is energized, and I feel it carries that throughout the movie, save for the pacing, which I'll get to later. But in how we meet Han Solo, how he's together with Kira, and how he eventually even joins the Empire. That's how he also gets his name, Han Solo. And how we are dropped into the backdrop of a war-type setting and how he is involved with Beckett and his wife. It's interesting to see how he is tossed into these kind of situations. And then when he meets Chewbacca, there's quite a bit dropped in here and there that make references of what's going to happen in the future. And like I've mentioned earlier, and how he got his name Han Solo. It was kind of cheesy, but it seemed fitting, I guess. And then we progress with the rest of the movie and how it's basically a swashbuckling space adventure, which was pretty engaging to see in how Solo jumps from place to place, which brings me to the action sequences themselves. I thought director Ron Howard handled the focus of them, along with the focus of most of the movie, with some nice energy, like I said, that is brimming throughout this movie, and also some fun. That's a big word I would say to describe this film, as it is fun. There is an overwhelming sense of lightheartedness, a lot of fast-paced nature that is involved with the action sequences too. Like, there's this train sequence that involves Han, Chewie, Beckett, and some others, and that was unique to see on screen as well. The overall look of this movie, I thought, was interesting to see too, with it looking like another Star Wars movie with practical effects, CGI mixed in. The CGI character that Jon Favreau does play, I felt was actually mixed into the movie immensely well, seamlessly almost. And to get back to talking about the action sequences too, we do get to see the famous Kessel Run that has been talked about in other Star Wars movies, and how Han Solo did it in 12 parsecs, which seemed impossible. But remember, never tell him the odds. And that was exhilarating to watch as well. It goes along with some visuals that are really beautiful to see. The movie really is quite striking in many moments, like I've mentioned before. The cinematography I have to give a shout out to, as it was done by Bradford Young, which you may recall had done the cinematography for Arrival. He actually got an Oscar nomination for doing the camera work for this sci-fi film. And I have to mention the lighting in this movie as well, with the first 20 minutes or so. It was noticeably dark. There were shades of dark blue, black, gray, all of that used in the beginning. It was to reflect the setting that we were dropped into as the movie did begin. And I thought that created some more sense of atmosphere and an aura that we are dropped in the gritty universe that Han Solo has been living in for the majority of his life. The original score in this film, I think, also subtly added to the sense of entertainment that this movie has. John Powell's score, while it doesn't contain the most memorable pieces of music that have been used in a Star Wars movie before, I do think that they have a sense of tenacity, a sense of lightheartedness that continues. It almost sounds like the score for an Indiana Jones movie the more I think about it. Even with some of John Williams' recent compositions for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, they sounded like they came from Indiana Jones, another Lucasfilm property. And in fact, some of John Williams' iconic pieces from the original Star Wars movies do pop up here, but they are sparingly used throughout. The editing for this film and how the movie was stringed together from scene to scene, I thought was good. For a movie that was fast-paced in the first 2/3, I would say, it never ran at a pace that was too much to handle or too slow, because of how much the characters were doing on screen and what was involved with the simple yet competent enough narrative that was continuously moving the whole flow of the movie forward. The pacing for the film, like I've said, it is fast-paced for the first notable segments and until the middle half of the film. But then as it reaches the third act, I felt it tended to drag. This is where I get into some of the more notable problems I had with the film. Even for how much I was into the film, there was an overwhelming sense of predictability in what transpired for the film's narrative, as we can imply that the characters that we know don't show up later in the Star Wars timeline. Again, this movie takes place before A New Hope, yet I'm not sure where it would fit in. We know that some characters are either not going to have prominence again, or they don't end up making it by the end in the 2 hours or so that this movie runs. Maybe about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, it runs for about that long. We know pretty much what's going to happen in what Han Solo does by the end, as like I've said with Aaron Reich's performance, he later does pick up the traits that Ford has throughout his time playing the character. We just know what's going to happen, and sometimes the tension took me out of it. Also, the lack of a real villain didn't necessarily sit well with me. Now, not every movie needs to have a villain or a looming threat to make it tick, but for this kind of movie, there wasn't that much of a threat, really. I mean, I did mention Paul Bettany's sinister and villainous-like character, but he really didn't have that much to do until the end of the movie. Another example on how I felt this movie was cliche, aside from its predictability, has to do with some of the dialogue. It never got to the point of being horrendous. I don't think that it was ever cringeworthy, but at the same time, some of the lines were a bit too on the nose for its own good, and either having to do with foreshadowing and what happens later on in the Star Wars timeline, but also with it not fitting the context or situation of what it was being said in. And this technically being a Star Wars prequel. Now, also, having a surprise cameo show up within this movie. I'm not going to give away who does end up making an appearance in this film, but it dropped into my mind the idea of how now, apparently, the Star Wars TV shows, which I've never watched, mind you, I've only known of them, and how some of the content within the TV series is apparently now canon. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this entirely fits in. In fact, my friend who I saw this movie with asked me for clarification as to who this surprise character is and how this person fits into the overall Star Wars timeline, put in Solo specifically. But yeah, in terms of how I felt with my overall experience with this movie, I would kind of compare it to Justice League. Now, yeah, Justice League is another much maligned movie by either its core fan base or some casual moviegoers, but I admittedly gave Justice League more credit than it deserved because A, I'm tired of the hate with the DCEU overall, and I really want to like the franchise overall, even if I wasn't that big of a fan of Batman vs. Superman or Suicide Squad. But yeah, there's that, and B, I also was mainly looking at the entertainment value or how much I enjoyed the movie in watching it because, like Justice League, I did have fun with Solo in watching it. Coincidentally, Justice League has a bunch of similarities to Solo that I haven't even thought about until now, like its troubled production. To me, the appeal of Solo, a Star Wars story, will mainly go towards fans of the franchise who know what to expect going in, basically checking their expectations at the door. A casual Star Wars fan who is not really that invested in this franchise, or even a person who has never seen a Star Wars movie before and is basically going in blind, having no prior information. I feel like maybe the less you know about Star Wars or Han Solo in general, the more you'll get invested. At the same time too, though, even with the enjoyment factor of this movie in my mind, I really don't see much of this movie warranting its existence either. It just seemed like it was one entry that was milked out just to milk more of this franchise, as again, we are getting more Star Wars movies for the foreseeable near future. By the way, it was just recently announced that we're getting a Boba Fett movie headed by James Mangold, and at that rate, are we just gonna get more spin-off movies focusing on individual Star Wars characters? By that logic, we should be getting more development on the Obi-Wan movie starring Ewan McGregor. Like, come on, I think most people like myself would so want that movie to happen sooner than later. I have to give credit where credit is due, though, to director Ron Howard and the rest of the cast and crew, as this movie could have turned out way worse than anyone else may have expected this movie to turn out, given its troubled production. And I feel that Solo did make for a decent movie-watching experience. It is a fine way to kill about 2 hours or so, even if I feel there is nothing very memorable within it, even to those that go in with not the highest of expectations. For all of this, I cautiously recommend it. My final verdict for Solo, a Star Wars story, is 3 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Solo, a Star Wars story. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.